All right, let's talk about how to paint this table right here, how to get some results like this with, this particular model or any model that's like wood grained and you want it to look kind of distressed or something. It's pretty much the same process. This is one of the processes. I think it's a pretty good, inexpensive, fast, effective process. What you're going to need to do though is you can see on the model here, I've got some basic pre-shading done. You can do this with a brush, or I did it with an airbrush. I did some Vallejo primer gray on the overall table. Then I just went black through. I went back through with a little surface primer black of Vallejo also. And there's no real recipe or specific way to do it. You want full coverage of the gray, and you want to put some not solid black down. You want it to be some light dusty black in just random spots where you think you're going to want some tonal values or color density to show through the washes you're going to paint with. Keep in mind this part of it is really important because this is what's going to show through all the washes, and so it's going to give you the the white or the lighter parts of the wood that are going to look like they're sort of worn or sun bleached away or whatever the term is. So don't skip this part. And you don't have to use gray. I mean, you could use the color of another, you could use another color if you want, but just be mindful that, gray is a neutral color and it's going to allow other colors to go on and not change, the way they look. Then you're going to need a cup of whatever your base color is, which in this case, I think I used a burnt umber. It's really watered down. You want it so watered down that, you'd think it wasn't even going to work. That's how watered down you want it. And then a cup of clear water next to it. See, I used some burnt umber, and really that's the only colors I used in here was burnt umber, and I used bone white on the bone, but that's all I used, and a black wash. That's it, man. There's no other color. You just arrive at the end, then you need some brushes. So this is another important tip. Don't use the same brush for all of this. You want some varying brush sizes because you're going to be working bigger and then smaller. So, and then I do have a little sour cream container lid there or something that my wife rummaged out of the trash because, she knows what I like. And we've got some 100%, I think that's some burnt umber on there also. It looks a little light. It might be chestnut, but who knows? I think it's burnt umber. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But you want 100% color on some, place that you can access it, and you'll see why in a little bit. But, like I say, the watered down bit is really, it's just really watery. The whole trick to this is it's like cutting hair. You can take more off, but you can't put it back. So it's better to build it up with a real watered down light coat than start off dark and be like, dang it. And you're going to need a hair dryer. I use a heat gun, and it really benefits because it dries quickly and it doesn't allow the water to sit there and air dry and then change the shape as it spreads out and levels itself across the model. You saw how thin that was on the side of the cup there too. That's how thin you want this. You want it really. Did I say you want this thin and watery? Okay, you want it thin and watery. So anyway, let's get to working on this. And this is one table I'm doing, but I'm actually doing 5. And there's one to the side there you see I've already done. That was the first one that I did to make sure I could get it right before I did a video. So let me bring the other 4 over, and now that I feel I can get it right, I'll make a video about it. No, I used this on the Stagecoach wooden wagon also. This method, it's a great method. It's basically your watercoloring. When you've got the big thick pad of paper and you add your watercolors and you can see the other colors through. It's the same thing here. It's really, you're just watercoloring. The whole idea behind this is, like I say, it's watercoloring, and you want to be able to blend these together. You don't want to see where one color stops and the other color starts. You want to make them a nice smooth transition between, build up. See here, you've got some nice transitions. It's pretty smooth. There's no solid bars of one color. They all blend into each other, leaving light spots in the middle. See that base coat of primer down below, and the pre-shading, the value that has in this is really important. And so I'm going to show you how I did it, and it's pretty darn easy. Let's get to it. First thing, you want to control the amount of water. You don't want to just go slathering water all over the place, because you're going to get runs and drips and things like that, and you're going to get a mess. Control the water. Take your time. Work in the direction of the grain. Don't just put it on all diagonal and slop it on there like gravy on a biscuit. You just want to do what I'm doing here. This is the first coat. It's going to knock the primer back, and it's going to, change the brightness of the base coats. And then once you get that done, we'll start adding more layers of this wash mixed with some 100% paint on the edges and things like that, and we'll get it to where we want to start getting the effect that we want of the actual color built up to the density that we want. And so it's pretty easy, but it takes a few passes. And I'm doing all these because we're doing a West Coast Mythics meetup, and these tables are going to be there at that event in Sacramento, which is going to be fun. It's my first time going there, and of course there'll be a Legion's Con too, but I'll have to make a lot more than 4 for Legion's Con. So my printers have been whirring away. Legion's Con will be here faster than we know, and I need to have stuff ready. And this is a technique that I use for lots of different props just like this that I want to make look weathered. And I'm spilling my secrets. Also, for the people that are on Patreon, you get this table file for free. So thanks to all my Patreon members. I appreciate all of you who continue to support me and be a part of the channel and all the interactions and all the things that we do on the Instagram threads. I appreciate all the feedback and interactions. So anyway, we'll get to brushing this base coat on. And once I get the last table done with this initial base coat, I'll go through and I'll hit it with the heat gun. And what that does is, well, it dries it, of course, but it lets me see, really just how dark this dries. Because it looks really nice right now, but it's going to dry lighter because it's not wet. So, and be careful with the heat gun and PLA, not because it's flammable, but because it will melt. This stuff does not like heat. So if it's too hot for your hand, it's too hot for the PLA. So anyway, it sounds like a movie. Yeah, anyway. We'll go ahead and from a distance, we'll get these base coats drying. And you can already see the value in, how important that primer and pre-shading is as a starting point that you build on. I mean, already you've got something that's like, whoa, okay, that's really cool. You can already visually see where this is going. And so that's, I used to, it's just paint stuff, man. Back like a long time ago, I didn't understand the value in primer, and, I just want to airbrush stuff on stuff and paint on stuff. But primer really is a pretty important step. I can't say for like painting figures and stuff, because I don't paint figures and faces. It's, good Lord, I would ruin them all. I could get away with a lot doing old broken down tables and rusty prison bars. It's pretty forgiving. So you can see here how everything's drying up and the gloss is going away, and it's, sort of muting down a bit, and we don't have to wait 45 minutes between coats for it to dry. I love this heat gun, and I've had it for a while. I've dropped it and fixed it and dropped it and fixed it and burnt myself with it and melted plastic bags with it. And yeah, we've been through stuff, this heat gun and I. So let's continue to build up on the browns. We ultimately want to arrive at something like the finished one that you see in the lower right corner of the, lower right third of the frame anyway. I don't know what I'm saying here. I was originally doing audio while I did the video, but then my dog started barking and my wife started talking, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just do voiceover. So let's go back through. And this is a visual part where you kind of just have to imagine or look at a printed, reference or an image online as a reference. And you want to go back through and start darkening this up. Not all of it. You just want to maybe, here I darken the edges and I sort of work my way from the edges inward, dark from the edges, lighter as it gets toward the center. And something that's really helpful is when you want to work in the direction of the grain, just turn the table. And you'll see I'll turn the table here in a minute. And it helps work. It helps everything flow better. And it just looks a bit more, I don't want to say realistic, because these tables aren't realistic, but it's just a better way to paint. Your strokes are more in line with the direction of the wood grain and stuff like that. And I don't know why I haven't turned the table yet. I'm just, who knows what I'm thinking right here, but I'll turn the table in a minute because that's what you're supposed to do. Sometimes, I do stuff that just doesn't make any sense. But here we're putting the 100% on right at the edges there. And I think I'm not turning the table because I have the camera there and I just don't feel like moving stuff. But I'm going to turn it here in just a second. I promise you I will. I don't even know why I'm working like that. That's ridiculous. Get your stuff together. But once again, I dip the brush in a little bit of water. Then I dip it in the 100% paint. And then I just hit the corners, the edges of this, and I drag inward. And you want to create, I don't know if you've ever, there's what's called a rat tail stroke. And the rat tail stroke, if you can imagine a rat tail, it's fat at the beginning and it tapers out at the end of the tail. Imagine that as a brush stroke. It's wide and flat at the beginning and, like an airplane taking off toward the end of the stroke. And that's kind of what you want to do. You want to create like a rat tail stroke here. And that sort of helps blend it toward the end when you're going to get the transition into the other colors there, where you're going to get the transition into where it's going to be more transparent. And so also it helps to change the orientation of the brush. Instead of having it flat, go ahead and turn it on one of its sides and use just the corner and create a rat tail stroke with that. And that gives you another sort of look to the, see, here we go. I got my thinking in order here. I don't know what I was doing. You can see how I'm kind of lifting up toward the end of the stroke, and I'm really lightly here. There's not a lot of paint on here. It's 100%, but I dipped it in a little bit of water, and then I'm just gonna bring it back with that rat tail stroke and kind of bring it in toward the center and just blend this together, keeping the edges darker and lighter toward the center. And that's all I'm doing. That's pretty much the same process for the entire table. Video over. There you go. Hope you guys liked it. See you next month. All right. But honestly, I'm not far off of the truth there. It's just, this is pretty much the way you do the entire table, legs and all. And it's just a matter of, see how I change the brush to its side right there? And it creates some thinner lines and it creates some patterns in the wash that you overlay with other layers of wash. And it just creates a depth that looks really cool. That's all. I said all that to say that. You ever know anybody that can talk a lot and never really say anything? That's me. The older I get, the more that becomes true. But look how this table is shaping up already. I mean, it's funny, we'd never go buy a table like this, but in our toy photography, we want that story, that character, that depth, that, look of worn and age. And this is how you do it. There's other ways to do it, but this is a fun way. I mean, you can do so many different paint projects with the same technique. And once again, we'll just hit it with the heat gun, dry it, And what this does too is it helps me see if there's any strokes from the brush that haven't blended with, there's a real defined stroke edge to it, and I don't want that. I want those blended and soft, and I want them all to sort of seamlessly, wash into each other. And so this helps me see that. And if you let it dry on its own, you get a little bit different look to it than if you put the heat on it. Something about hitting it with the heat makes the patterns and the brush strokes dry just the way you laid them down, and that's important for all the the rat tail stroke and all those wispy edges that the brush has. It really helps in doing that. When you let it air dry, you don't get that same patterning in there, and it's important on something like this. So once again, we got all the tabletops done. That was fast, wasn't it? I mean, it was really that simple. It doesn't. I mean, it's that simple of a process. So I want to work on the sides here, and I'm going to dip a little bit of water. Then we're going to do the 100%. And what that does, instead of just dipping it in the water, it gives me a little bit darker than the wash that's in the cup. And it makes the paint a little bit more fluid. On the edges of the table, it's modeled a bunch of little cracks and crevices, and I want adding the water helps that paint flow into all that stuff and cover it pretty good. So I don't want it 100%, but I do want it darker than the wash that's in the cup. And so, because the edges of the table in my mind and the way that I'm seeing this model is I want the edges to be dark and it to get lighter as it's toward the center of the table where the wizard or whoever's using this table, would normally create natural wear in the table. And so that's what we're doing. Same thing here, just hitting all the sides really good with a nice soft brush. And the excess paint that is on those edges, I'm just dragging it back up over the top and back down toward the center of the middle of the table. And that helps blend everything again, darkening the edges and keeping everything, avoiding the watery paint on the edge of the table from creating any drips or runs. I'm just, sort of bringing it back up over the edge and stroking it down toward the center of the table, and it just creates a nice dense blend that still allows you to see through it. Look at this, see? Same thing on this side. And this is one of those things that's so easy that, it's easy to overcomplicate and overthink it. At least I can. I'm the kind of guy that turns the house to change the light bulb. It can't be this easy. There has to be something more difficult to this. Hang on, let me turn the house. That's me. But no, just let it be easy. Take your time. Rotate the brush. Add more wash. Let it dry. And you'll get the buildup, and you'll see how this starts to work, and you'll really dig it. It's a cool process. And that stagecoach that I did, or that wooden Western Pioneer wagon, that's all I did with this is just washes. On that, I think I used like a raw sienna or something like that, or I forget what color I used. And at the end of this, I'll show you how to make wood grain without any wood grain. Just paint it on. I'll show you. It's pretty simple way. So we're going to do the legs now. The main thing on the legs, before I say that, notice how this whole table is all just the same wash. There's not a variety of colors I'm pulling out here. There's not a variety of different, browns. It's all done by building up on your pre-shaded and pre-primered piece, just different layers of wash. So I said that. Now I'll move on to what I want to do with these legs. The legs aren't going to be white, obviously, or gray. So I need to knock that back quite a bit. And we're going to start with making sure that the brush isn't overloaded. We don't want what we're putting on the legs to run back down on the tabletop or to run back down anywhere and create drips and messes. It needs to just be enough to cover the brush. And I got a drip there somehow. I didn't pay attention, so I'm just going to put a little water on there and rub it away. See, that's exactly what you want to avoid, a drip. But you can fix this. It's no big deal. But that's why it's important to control the water and just look before you put your fingers in places and make sure that it's dry and there's no drips and you don't have an uncontrollable amount of water on the model, because you're not going to get the effect that you want. So go ahead and continue to knock back the brightness of the legs just by adding some real light coats of wash on there. And I'm almost dry brushing at this point the water on there, because this PLA really takes the wash super nicely. With the primer on there, it just really grabs hold of the paint nice. And you can see here how the pre-shading helps. It really helps. There's going to be some darker browns on this table and some lighter spots of browns on the table legs that are going to help create the wear and the bleaching and the sun fading and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know any wood color in real life. I don't know any real wood color that this would be. When I create the wood tables and stuff, I really gravitate toward raw sienna, burnt umber. I like the chestnut, and I kind of just create my own thing, it works, and that's kind of what I do. But yeah, here, see, I barely dip the brush in the water, just the tip, and then I knock it back on the edge and sort of squeeze the excess water out, and I just keep building it up. See that? Wipe it off, brush it on, and if anything starts to get away from me, I've got the heat gun there, so you can just go ahead and dry it up instantly. You don't really want to touch those once you put the wash on with your gloves or anything, because then it breaks the pattern. It breaks the continuity, the uniformness of the stroke. It breaks that up. Oh my goodness. I don't know about me, but yeah. So we hit all these legs on all edges. Rotate the table around, looking at all the corners, making sure we've got every leg, because I've been known to miss the inside of something, and it's easy to do because each leg has 4 sides, so 4, 8, 12, that's like 16 sides you got to get, right? If my math is right. 4 times 4, 16. It's still 16, right? This is 2025. I think 4 times 4 is still 16. But anyway, same thing on all the tables. We just make sure we get it all done on all the tables. And I won't bore you with all those legs. Let's do the sides. But you can see here how I've got the legs pretty nice. We're going to let those legs dry. And later on, if I feel that they're a bit splotchy, or if there's some parts that are a bit too white showing through, too much of that base gray primer is showing through, I'll just, brush those real lightly with some wash and just start to knock that back a little bit. Same thing though here. We're going with the direction of the wood grain on the table. And so that helps keep everything looking right, and you can kind of play with this here, make it darker than the rest of the table. There wouldn't be much wear in there, so I make it a little bit darker than the rest of the table, but I mean, it'd be entirely up to you. Your table is your table. Same thing all the way around. If there's any white spots that I missed, I'll go ahead and get those right now. But look how, once again, that's kind of my pattern. Dark at the edges and light toward the center. It's the same on the sides. I do the same thing. I don't know, something mentally in my mind thinks that looks good, and that's what I just tend to stay with. See, we're not dripping, we're not running down. It's just enough water on there to cover and not create any mess. And we'll do the same on all the tables. You don't have to watch all those. So we move to the inside of the drawer, and here it's really just about adding some wash and then letting it dry with the heat. You want the black to show, the black shading that I have in there to show through and create some like worn looking spots. And don't get carried away and add too much water in here. But I hit it with the heat and it dries quickly. And then I do that on all sides of the drawer. Because if you're going to photograph this, you might have it open where you would see the sides of the drawer. So you want to make sure you paint all those things. Even the bottom of the drawer, I'll paint the bottom of the drawer because you never know what angle somebody's going to photograph this at. They might be taking a picture of somebody under the desk and the drawer is open, and now you've got a ugly white bottom drawer on an old wooden desk, so don't be lazy. Paint it all. Put a little bit more. I think that's chestnut or nut. I think that's chestnut, but I should have put burnt umber. So I'm like, wait a minute, that's the wrong color. Let's put burnt umber. Good thing these paints are only like $3 a bottle or whatever. I waste so much of them, man. But honestly, apple barrel paints are fantastic, man. I couldn't see myself doing this with any other paint. I mean, I have my airbrush paints, but I even airbrush with the apple barrel paint sometimes. But at any rate, so yeah, we're going to go ahead and do the front of the drawer, the face of the drawer around the bone. And that's done pretty much just with 100% burnt umber with a little bit of water mixed into it just to help it flow. And that's all it is. I'm not doing anything fancy with that. I'm not really concerned with what shows through or what doesn't show through on the face of the drawer, because your eye's going to be drawn to the bone anyway, which we'll get to that in a bit. But let that dry, hit it with the heat, and I mean, we're almost done. I mean, this is, hopefully you can see, and hopefully this is a simple process for you. And you might already know this process. You might. It's just nothing new. It's just watercolors. I didn't invent it. But it's a fun effect because typically when you're creating like distressed wood and stuff and you have wood grain in a model, you usually have to like paint the distress on there or do some kind of paint peeling or paint chipping or stipple with a sponge different random patterns of paint color. You have to paint the age on there. This here is a little bit different effect. It's a little bit easier effect and less involved as long as you have a nice base coat underneath. Here's the wood grain trick I was going to tell you about. And I used the same wood grain trick on the Stagecoach on the inside of it when I didn't actually model any wood grain on the inside of the wooden wagon. You can put your wash on here, put it on good so you've got some nice fluid coverage, but don't let it spill over the edges. And then change the orientation of the brush, change it to its side, and just drag the brush through the water. And it's going to create different streaks in there. And then hit it with the heat gun, and when it dries, it's going to stay with those streaks in there. If you let it air dry, it won't do it as well, but if you hit it with a heat gun or a hair dryer, it's going to dry and leave those streaks in there, and it's going to look really cool. So I'll show you that here in just a second. When it dries, you can already see the streaks in there, and it creates kind of a wood grain look, without having to like paint individual lines and come up with ways to try to mimic wood grain with a paintbrush. See that? That looks really cool. It's a cool way to sort of fake some wood grain. Instead of just painting it flat brown on the bottom, it just looks visually a little bit more appealing this way. We're going to a little bit of Vallejo bone white. Dip it in a little bit of water and go over the bone. The bones are also pre-shaded with a little bit of black wash on there, and so we're just going to paint those rascals up with some bone white. Man, I'm a fast painter. Look at that. If I could paint like that. Whew. Be in business. A little bone white on there, and at the end we'll just knock that back with a little bit of black wash. And you don't want the bone to be too vibrant. Nobody wants vibrant bones. Bones shall be dull by order of the king. I don't know why I said that. It sounded good. But anyway, if you haven't done so already, like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Think about becoming a Patreon member. I give you files like this table here for free. Every month you get all kinds of different free STL files to print yourself and painting tutorials and all kinds of stuff. Thanks.